Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and I think honestly the biggest movie that we've had in months has now officially hit theaters, Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. So if you are new here, consider dropping a like down below, subscribing, drop a comment down. It keeps you involved with everything that we have going on here. Plus, if you like what you hear, why not? But Killers, spoilers, warning is now. But Matt, we finally seen it. It's felt like 3 years coming because I feel like every year since the COVID years, like Killers might come out this year, and it's like, oh no, next year, oh no, next year, and then so many people got to see it earlier this year at Cannes, and then it's been screened for some critics for the past few weeks, but now it's finally to the general public. We have both laid eyes on it, and if you saw some of our videos earlier in the week, you may know that we both were a little let down.
Yeah, I feel so bad. This has been a year for me of being let down by movies I'm incredibly excited for. But to your point, yeah, this is probably the biggest film that's come out since Oppenheimer and Barbie released. We've had a few kind of dead months, and now Killers of the Flower Moon is here, and we can get back into talking about the Oscar race and about great filmmakers. Now, yeah, like I just said, unfortunately, this is not the first movie this year that has kind of let me down. But anyways, before we get into our real thoughts on Killers of the Flower Moon, let's just describe what the movie is about first. Just as a recap, if you're here, you should have seen the movie. If you haven't seen the movie, fucking leave. Get out of here. What are you doing? Go watch the movie. Why are you listening to us talk about the movie? Just go see it. Go make your own mind up. Anyways, this film follows the story of the Osage murders of the 1920s. It follows the story of a family in Osage County in Oklahoma, specifically a man named Ernest, his uncle King Hale, and they are conspiring to murder all of the very wealthy Osage in the area. The Osage have come into a lot of oil money from the land on which they live. Per capita, the Osage are the most wealthy people in the world, which means that the dregs of society, the scummiest white people in the world, have now made their way to Osage County to try and manipulate their way into taking the Osage's fortune. That's what the film follows, and it specifically follows the relationship between Ernest, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and Molly, played by Lily Gladstone, who get married, and he is secretly trying to manipulate her and get her head rights and take her money the entire time. Now, this is based on a true, very tragic American story, and it is not an easy film to watch, is what I'm going to say. This is not meant to be entertaining. It is meant to be tragic and horrifying, and it makes you feel that the entire time. So anything to add to the plot description there, Dylan?
I think you nailed on the head pretty much, and I would also add in most of Ernest's decision-making comes from his uncle, William King Hale, who's played by Robert De Niro, and at least to me, one thing I think is super interesting about this movie, and I guess this role of Ernest, is Ernest is kind of a loser who doesn't really have a say anything, and he gets pushed around by a lot of different people, and we've never really seen Leo play a character like this. So I know we'll talk more about performances later, but I thought that was a very interesting angle for them to take. I know there's been a lot of discussion around should they have gone with a different angle to approach the story, because they already changed the approach one time from being an FBI investigation to being more about the people causing the murders and one of the people involved who lost a lot of family members. But I know there's so many different angles that you could take about this, and it's interesting that this is the one that Scorsese went with.
So in general, let's just talk about Scorsese. How do we feel about him? It's a dumb question because he's the GOAT.
Yeah, he's the originator of cinema. We have a tier list coming out later this week where we can hear all of our thoughts about Scorsese from top to bottom. But yeah, we both think he's amazing. Silence is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Scorsese is incredible. Now, I will say that I don't know how I've felt about his latest works. I was kind of mixed on The Irishman. I liked it, but I was a little bit let down. And I felt similarly to this. And I found that they have kind of similar issues to each other. And even Silence, I didn't love that one as much as some of his others. So I have kind of been feeling a little bit less hot on Scorsese in the past 10 years than I have before that. Wolf of Wall Street was the last film of his that I would say was a truly great film, in my opinion, personally. And that's what I guess carries through to Killers of the Flower Moon. I overall felt that there was a lot of very strong elements to this movie and some things that truly just didn't work. What really works the most for me is the general moral issue in the film of how racists can justify their racism. And specifically, the I have a black friend ideology of like, well, I can't be racist because I like this one person of the race that I don't like. And that's so fascinating here because we see Ernest have this constant disregard to other indigenous people. He constantly, one scene that really comes to mind right away is very early on, he's driving Molly around. There's a cut to these two indigenous people being robbed at gunpoint by a bunch of people in masks. And then we see it's Ernest. And he says something to them along the lines of, "You never worked for anything you were given." And the fascinating thing that I think this film does really well is showing how Ernest can internally justify his feelings of hatred towards the Osage. Him feeling like they didn't earn what they have, and yet he would never say that about Molly. He would always say that she is stubborn, she is resilient, she works for what she has, she is good. But it's that one of the good ones mentality that so many racists have, where they can justify hatred towards an entire group until they know one of them, and then that person is just one of the good ones. That is such a fascinating thing going on in this film. But also on another level, I do think that the Osage were pushed to the side a little bit too much in this movie, and I felt very conflicted about that because as much as some people might say Lily Gladstone was the heart of the film, I've seen so many people say that online, I just thought like she was pushed to the side through the film. I didn't feel like I got much of her character. I didn't feel like I got much of her story. I didn't feel like I got much of her pain. I just felt like I was watching a crime movie about people doing atrocious acts.
I think the most interesting thing with Killers of the Flower Moon is how it portrays King Hale and all those who follow him, and you could call them their servants, because while I've seen so much talk online of how it's a love story between Leo and Lily Gladstone's characters, to me, I didn't really get that at all. There's like one scene of them flirting and then they were married. At least the whole plot narrative for me is Robert De Niro's character runs this place, but from the shadows. But it's not really the shadows because everyone knows what's going on, but they can't stop it. And to see the links that people just bow to him to do whatever he says to complete these heinous and evil acts and just commit tyranny on all these people. And I feel like that was the driving force of the nature. And that's why I think that final third act works so well, because you see his downfall and you see people turn on him. And you see Ernest start to think for himself, but still continue to make those wrong decisions, as you're talking about, because he just has built-in prejudice inside his body where he can't be completely just and moral because he still did these evil acts throughout because he thought it was for the better good. That's why, like, at least to me, I don't know if Ernest was actually super hateful and spiteful, or he was just listening to what everyone told him. Like, were these his own thoughts, or was he told, like, this is what I have to say because everyone around me is saying this and I just want to make money because, I love that money, or whatever he says in the trailer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I would say this film is a love story, and it's not a love story between Ernest and Molly. It's a love story between white imperialists and money, and how nothing can stand in the way of that love. Even in actual romance, nothing can get in the way of someone like Ernest going after for that sweet, sweet money. But ultimately, I don't think Ernest is not hateful. I would say Ernest is incredibly hateful. But more than that, he's stupid.
Yeah.
He's an idiot. He's someone that he can justify anything in his mind because he just genuinely is I think it's the stupidest person that Leonardo DiCaprio has ever played. And that's why he can justify all these terrible acts, because he doesn't view what he's doing as terrible. He's justifying everything through this doublethink of, oh, I love my wife, but at the same time, getting the money would be good for me, and it would be good for all of us. And ultimately, it's not really hurting her because I'm not actually hurting her. It's just like he's double thinking everything that he does, and justifying and rationalizing every single thing.
On the same note, with the focus of the story being more on the people who are committing these acts, we have Leonardo DiCaprio in the lead role. As you mentioned, this is probably the most stupid character that he's played. But as I mentioned before, to me, it just seems like he is just so, like, I don't know the right word, like a loser. Like, he just has no self pride. It's whatever his uncle says or his brother says or whoever he's with in the moment, that's what he does. And his thoughts can change from moment to moment because, like you said, there's some moments where he loves Molly, he wants his family to grow, and then he does this act that does the opposite of that. Or he'll be like, oh no, I'm not gonna do King anymore because I'm gonna be a family man, and then King's like, well, here's some money. Or someone's like, oh, we're gonna support you in this. He's like, oh, okay, well, let's poison my wife, sort of thing. But I think De Niro is the stand of our main three here. The way that he's able to portray menacing in a way that you fully despise this character that you're watching, but you recognize why so many of these men will follow his every step, I think is portrayed so well. His heinous actions and his plans throughout. You need someone who's believable to be likable enough while also portraying the villainous side of him. And part of that goes to the screenplay, and part of that also goes to De Niro's performance. And then I think Lily Gladstone gets to do a lot in this role. She's not screaming, yelling, crying the whole time, but she's able to do so much with her eyes and her face. There's specific scenes where she's walking through the streets, and you can see it's like a POV shot from her where all these white men and white women are just staring at her like, you don't belong, go away. And then you cut to her face. You can see how she's having to hold everything in, or how she's judging, or how she's plotting her next move. But I do agree. I wish she was in this movie more. I definitely think she gets sidelined, especially for those last, I don't know, maybe hour, maybe even hour and a half when, because it says a spoiler review, last chance, when she gets poisoned and just is bedridden for the rest of the way. Like, from that point on, she doesn't really get to do anything until the very, very end, where she's healthy again and gets to confront Ernest about, did you actually do this? Are you actually about this? And I think those parts are well. The ensemble overall, I think, is very good. I think the Osage members in the cast all get their individual moments to shine, and especially the individuals who play her family members, I think all at least have one moment where they get to very much showcase, like, hey, we have talent. One person in this cast I think is really bad, and I want you to guess, who do you think is the worst person in this cast?
Brendan Fraser.
Yes, bingo. Comes in.
Dumb boy!
And I don't know if that's his performance or just the way the character's written, but it very much just took me out of the scenes that he was in. But I thought John Lithgow, who was opposed of him, was very, very good in his limited screen time. I would have loved more John Lithgow, loved more Jesse Plemons, but they would have been more in the original telling of the story when it focused more on the FBI and even the trials that went after. I'm glad that we got more time with the Osage and more time with De Niro and DiCaprio than with another legal procedure.
Yeah, which, to be fair, I read the script for the movie, the original draft of it, before Scorsese came in to rewrite it. And it was initially an FBI story, where at the beginning it focused on Lily Gladstone, and it was much more focused on Lily Gladstone in the initial draft. And then about halfway through, it becomes Jesse Plemons' character's story, and Ernest is the background of everything. Mm-hmm. But when DiCaprio came onto the project, he was like, I want Ernest to be the lead role. And I will say, I genuinely didn't like the script that I read of Killers of the Flower Moon initially. So this was a major improvement on the initial draft that I had read, but I still have issues with it. Anyways, to talk about performances, I like this new phase of Leonardo DiCaprio's career ever since 2019, that every role he's played since has been a loser. 2019, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he is a loser in that movie. 2021, Don't Look Up. What a loser in that film, too. And obviously, of course, he eventually becomes cool, but he's still a loser. And Killers of the Flower Moon, again, we get DiCaprio in his loser era, and I love it. I love what he's doing with that. It's so interesting because, as we talked about in our draft video this week, he is so good at playing these suave characters, the people who are too cool, who are so classy. But lately, he's been playing the biggest losers that you can imagine, and I think it's a great career turn. Now, do I think that this is his best loser performance? No. Not necessarily. He's not bad in the film or anything, but, you know, there was a few moments that I was a little bit distracted by him on screen. I don't know. It almost feels like he was trying too hard to be this kind of, like, very idiot loser guy. So at times it didn't feel natural, it didn't feel quite believable, and I couldn't get it out of my head the knowledge that he had come in and seen that role and said, I think that should be the main character of the movie. That really the whole framing of it was less Scorsese and more DiCaprio saying that he wanted to play that role and make it a big... and of course, just to talk about Lily Gladstone, I think she did a very good job with what she was given. I think it's just incredibly unfortunate that she was not given more. And people are going to disagree with me on this and say, no, she was the heart of the movie. And I disagree. I think that the second she disappears, anytime she's off screen, the movie is not about her. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest fault of the movie, is that it's not her story here.
What do you mean Leo walks around saying... What do you mean Ernest walks around saying, my wife is sick, I love my wife, I gotta get back to my wife? Clearly she's the heart, duh.
It just sucks that, like, she becomes a secondary character in every single scene she's in. And that's why I think her being a lead actress in this is the biggest campaigning mistake that this has made, because in not one single scene is she the main character of the scene. In every scene, she's a secondary character, and she's not even in the movie that much. And it hurts my heart because she is giving more than most other people in this movie are. And yet she's sidelined through almost the entire film. It is a travesty that someone who is this good in the role is not given that much to do on screen. And not only that, she is so clearly a secondary character every single moment that she's there. It just sucks so much that that is how this movie plays out. And again, I've already had this conversation with people where they say that I'm wrong about this. Maybe I am. I just felt like she was not given enough to do in the context of the film. You know who I actually think is an excellent standout in this movie, though? Which you've Cara Jade Myers. She plays Anna. She's in it for 5 minutes, and every second she's on scene, and every second she's on screen, she is dominating. She is ruling the screen. You cannot look away from her when she's there, and I would say her shadow lingers over the movie, maybe even as much as Lily Gladstone's is when Lily Gladstone gets knocked to the side. When Cara Jade Myers' character Anna gets taken off the map, she stands there kind of as this lingering shadow of everything that's to come. You know, she is the reason why the FBI is brought in. She is the reason why everything escalates in this movie with the detectives and all of that. I think Cara Jade Myers is fantastic in this movie. And again, it's another shame that she's not in it more than she already was.
Including Cara Jade Myers, I thought all the family performances were very good, as I mentioned before. But continuing with the theme of the Osage representation in this movie, I thought the costumes and production design to highlight this community and this setting were all very well done. I know that you're not the biggest on the cinematography here, but I think the stuff to deal with outdoors works very well. It's just the indoor stuff where some of my woes with this movie comes from. And as mentioned on another episode, I don't think we've mentioned here so far, we both had sound issues when we went to see this. So we did not have the most clear, distinctive sound. So to me, the sound, the editing was a little fault, because when you have bad sound, it makes the movie feel a lot longer. And if you're a 3.5 hour movie, you feel like you're there for a long time. I like the score here. I get your complaints. I thought it added some extra oomph to the energy, and the score were some of the few scenes where the sound actually sounded good in my theater. But I think technically Killers of the Flower Moon shines. I just wish the script and the focusing of the editing condensed it a little bit more to make it more engaging all the way throughout, because I think the movie opens strong and ends strong. It's just that middle third after Molly dies, or not after Molly, after Molly's sister dies, Anna, until we get to the arrest, it's kind of just like, we've been here for a long time.
The production design of how they did the town is incredibly well thought out and detailed, and every different location in the movie has its own character to it. Costume design is also really, really well done. It's got a good attention to detail in it. But like I said earlier, I thought the cinematography was not very well done. The chiaroscuro, the differential between the light and shadow in this, it feels a little bit crunched. I don't know exactly what it is about it, but as much as it's great that they hired Robbie Robertson to do it, as probably one of the most well-known Indigenous artists in the music sphere, but it didn't do it for me. I didn't like the score. It felt dated already. Like, it didn't feel like I was watching a film in 2023. It felt like I was watching a film in the late 80s, early 90s, with how cheesy the music was the entire time. Maybe that's just me, but I did not love the music choices here. And that's sad because Robbie Robertson is one of the greatest musicians of his generation. The band is excellent, and I didn't like what he did here. Unfortunately.
So we may be a little bit lower in this movie. I'm giving it a very light 8. Matt gave it a very solid to strong 7.
Yeah,
a lot of critics
7.
out there and audiences have clamored for this saying it's one of the year's best across the board. So that brings us now to the awards scene. Since this is an awards channel after all,
Yeah.
Oscar time. Picture, probably, yeah.
It's getting in. I mean, the question isn't what is it getting nominated in, is what could it win, right? I think we know by now this is getting 8 to 12 nominations. Picture, director, actor, actress, supporting actor, screenplay, editing, yada, 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 yada. It's going to get cinematography, sound. It's going to get probably score. All of these things we know it's getting. But what can it win? So the main question on everyone's mind right now is, can this win Best Picture? Can this topple Oppenheimer? What do you think, Dylan?
I do not think so after seeing it. I just don't think it has the package, because heading into Killers of the Flower Moon, I thought its possible route to an Oppenheimer upset would be picture, obviously, adapted screenplay, actress, maybe supporting actor, and then a tech. Maybe it's score, maybe it's costumes, cinematography. But after seeing the movie, maybe supporting actor could be a win, but I doubt this would be a solo supporting actor win. So I think this is another Irishman where it's going to get a lot of nominations, but it will walk away empty-handed.
Yeah, I also agree with you. It's not going to win anything. Best Picture, it's too dark and slow to really make an impact on a preferential ballot. It's not going to feel good for people to vote for. So is it going to win Picture? No. This isn't the type of movie that wins Best Picture anymore. It is far too much. It is far too dark for a picture win. We don't see this happen anymore. Then, I mean, I've seen people say director. Could Martin Scorsese take it because of the narrative of how he represented the Osage, or because he's old now and this might be the last time to reward him? No, I don't think he can win. He's going to be solidly nominated, but I don't see any narrative to give him the win here, because ultimately there's more impressive directorial work this year with Christopher Nolan and Yorgos Lanthimos. Then I've seen a lot of people say Lily Gladstone is winning Best Actress, and that to me is unfathomable. The role is simply not a lead role, and she is relegated to a supporting role even in the scenes that she is on screen. I don't think she can topple, no matter what the narrative is, no matter how much of a Ke Huy Quan narrative she's trying to build with, I almost quit the industry and then Martin Scorsese called me. I do not see an angle for her to win Best Actress. In fact, I think I would put her behind both Emma Stone and Carey Mulligan right now. And after I see Anatomy of a Fall, I might put her behind Sandra Hüller as well. Robert De Niro, I've seen people say he could win, but what narrative do we have to give Robert De Niro another Oscar win after he already has 2 awards? And is the performance good enough to get him a third? Maybe. I mean, there's an argument for that, but at the same time, is it that clearly a better performance than, I don't know, Ryan Gosling, Robert Downey Jr., Mark Ruffalo?
I would be there in the same camp. But that brings us to the end of this. And speaking of the end, we have the end of this movie. So for the last time, if you haven't seen the movie, you probably should go watch it, because we both like the movie. We don't love it, but maybe you would love it. But the ending of this movie, I think, is one of the highlights. And I'll be a little bit contradictory. I did not like how this was done in Asteroid City, but I really like how it was done here in Killers of the Flower Moon, of turning it into, we were just listening to someone give a play or give a newspaper read and tell a story of something that has happened in the past. And I thought the way it was introduced and then carried out with Scorsese himself walking out and the little sound effects, bells and whistles, and how it was all carried out was very well. I would have loved, because at the beginning of the movie they showed like stock footage. I don't know if that was actual stock footage of stuff back then or just recreations, but I would have loved if that would have played over this ending. When you first see like Scorsese walk out, instead of just watch him read from a paper, you go to footage of what he's talking about. But
That's what Spike Lee would have done.
Yes, a Spike Lee type ending. I mean, it kind of already is a Spike Lee ending, so I would love to hear. He just talked about Oppenheimer. I want to hear his thoughts on Kills of the Flower Moon, but I did like the cut to modern day Osage and them celebrating and showing that they are still living, they are still here, they are full of life, and they progress from this. And I very much like the inclusion of Molly's final will of how she did not let these tragedies define her as a person. She still lived her life and still made progress and still was able to make something for herself and didn't let the tragedies that were brought to her by these evil people around her define who she was as a person.
I'll go a little bit further back from the ending because I actually think one of the most impactful parts of the ending is the final meeting between Ernest and Molly. And not just that, but in court when he's asked, was he directed by King Hale to marry Molly? And he says no. And what I want to raise the question to you is, do you think he was lying? No. Or do you think he genuinely believes it?
I think he genuinely believed it because unless we were led to believe something different at the beginning, I never got the sense that Hale was telling him, go for Molly, go for this. He met Molly first when he's like, oh, do you know who Molly is? He's like, yeah, I liked her or something. I think that DiCaprio actually loved her, and that's where some of the moral questions come throughout, where because you see him timid to actually give her the insulin if it was really insulin and the extra stuff to slow her down. Throughout, we see how he's timid. He doesn't really want to do it, but he does because that's what his uncle who pushes him around tells him to do. And I think he does care for Molly. He does care for his kids, and he actually wanted that part. But he, as you mentioned, thinks on both sides and thought he could have it both, have a family and also steal their money from them.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'd say exactly that because I don't know if he actually does love her. I think he thinks that he loves her. And I think the thing with his lie in court, I feel like it's the type of thing where he has repeated a lie so many times in his head that he just fully believes that it's the truth now, that he has justified his actions so much that he doesn't think that it was anyone else's idea but his own. He is someone who's so susceptible to being pushed in different directions that he is not even engaging with the possibility that any of this was not his idea. That, King Hale did tell him to marry Molly, but he is justified to himself, no, it was my idea. And that's what I'll leave my thoughts on this film with. It is definitely a fascinating film. I'm really excited to see it a second time. While I do have some problems with it, there's so many interesting things to think about and to talk about with this movie that it's very possible I grow on it in future watches.
I also very much enjoy Kills of the Flower Moon. I do think it is a feat of cinematic achievement, for better or for worse. I think you do feel its massive 3.5-hour runtime throughout, but as I mentioned before, the technical prowess keeps you glued to the screen. This ensemble that ranges from Hollywood stars like De Niro and DiCaprio to the native Osage people that they did cast in the supporting roles, I think captivates your eyes, and I think the emotional weight of this tragedy, because one thing that you touched on before, but to bring back here, is they don't shy away from these tragedies. They show them in full front. You have to endure them because it's not sugarcoating that these things happen. It's letting you know how brutal and how demoralizing these actions were. And I think the thing that Kills the Flower Moon does best of all is it leaves you with something to think about and discussion points to have with those that you see it with or those who you may talk about with long after the credits roll. And while Killers may not be the best thing that you're watching during those 3.5 hours, it just sparks so much after the runtime.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about, and a lot of these ideological concerns are baked into the movie. Some of the reasons why I might not love the movie's thinking about those things. It knows that it's complicit. It knows that this story is maybe not the most authentic portrayal of what the Osage went through. And maybe one day we'll see that perspective reflected on screen. It's not in this film, but Scorsese acknowledges that.
Mm-hmm. Well, for everyone out there, we would love to hear your thoughts about Kills in the Flower Moon down below. Consider dropping a subscription if you made it this far, because we talk movie news almost each and every day. And drop a like because it helps us grow. But until next time, my name is Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.